you listeners at home might be tempted to make your own bagels. And I understand why you might want to do that because I've defended that argument and that solution to your problems so well.
Mhm.
But let me tell you why this is one of the hardest baked goods to make. Now, I'm not one of the biggest bakers in the world and or one of the most talented ones. I don't pipe frosting in my spare time simply because I don't eat frosting and I don't like baked goods that much. So I still know quite a bit and I can work my way around a whisk. In the world of baking, bakers talk a big game about making the perfect macaron with a nice pied at the bottom. And they talk about making the flakiest croissant with the most defined buttery layers. But we don't talk enough about how difficult great bagel making is. It's a hot take on my end, but it's an honest one. You're not a full fledged baker until you've tamed the beast and made the perfect bagel. And you do not need a wood fired oven to approximate the real thing, but you do need a lot of practice. So, as we've said a couple times, I developed my own homemade recipe and I'll make sure to put it on thecanadianfoodblog.ca. But here's a brief, although not so brief breakdown. So, the first step is to knead. You need to mix all the ingredients together and knead for at least 30 minutes, but in my experience, sometimes up to an hour. You want to do it until the dough is really, really smooth. So you want to build as much gluten as possible, and there's no shortcut for it. I know because I've tried. So I'm very, very lucky. I have a stand mixer. I've tried to use a stand mixer to make bagel dough. It can absolutely completely destroy a stand mixer. So I put the bagel dough that was half kneaded in the machine, and after about 3 minutes, the machine started heating up, and then it started smelling like smoke, and I realized I was about to destroy a $600 stand mixer, and so I stopped. Now, how was your experience kneading?
Do um, yeah, I feel like I mentioned this before, but my arms died on me pretty much. Um, it got to a point where I was like, is this enough or is this not enough? Like I was so confused by it, but I
Oh
just kept
yeah,
going, like it was so confusing, so tiring,
you
so
do.
tedious. Dear God, what a roller coaster it was pretty much.
So
But overall, I
yeah.
mean, it takes time. It takes time.
Yeah, it takes a really long time. I think there might be a shortcut where if after 10 minutes of kneading, you stop and let the dough be for 10 minutes or even just 5.
Hmm.
I believe, although I have to, research this and make my own tests, that it will let the gluten matrices develop on their own, hereby cutting on your own personal labor. Now,
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure in modern bagel, uh, you know, productions, I guess, or modern bagel shops, they actually just use a really really strong mixer.
Hmm.
So it's a completely different machine. I'm pretty sure it's quite as strong as a car, and it'll mix everything together. But it is actually a common expression to say that bagel dough is a dough that has to be kneaded by foot, just because it's really that hard. So that's sort of one of the big factors that makes it kind of, I don't want to say counterintuitive, but less than appealing to make. Now, the second step would be the rise. So you're going to shape the dough into a rough ball. You're going to grease it lightly, cover it with plastic, or in some cases, if you want, you can just use a towel. And you're going to let it proof for the first time in a controlled environment for an hour. So, depending on where you are in Canada, there's a huge difference compared if you're up the mountains in BC and Nova Scotia or in the middle of a freezing Montreal winter where hydro is super expensive and you're a college student. It's really, like, you're not going to pay for that. You're just going to stay with blankets. So, you could either underproof or overproof based on the temperature in the room. So, there's a tip that is so, so useful from Claire Saffis. She argued, she's a wonderful baker from the US who was known for her work at Bon Appetit, but now works for a bunch of other media outlets. She realized, I guess, or share the beautiful tip that an oven is essentially a controlled, insulated environment. So, regardless of what the temperature in your house is, the temperature in the oven will always remain the same. So, what she does is, she covers the whole thing, puts it in the oven, turn off, and then she'll turn the light on. Just the heat of the light itself is enough to warm through the bagels. Now, I'm not sure. Did you do that or just left it in the on the counter?
I actually couldn't figure out how to turn on the light in my oven. Lucky me though.
Do
The
you mean the light?
the light in the oven. Yes, I couldn't figure out how to turn it on. Um,
Okay.
but lucky me though. The thing right above the oven, the one with like the
Yes.
light and the thing that turns on, had like two light settings, and one of them was really, really
Oh, okay.
bright, kind of. And the area that I was in, I mean, the kitchen, obviously. I mean, the window was pretty closed, shut tight. I try to make sure that the temperature in the room stayed at like I think it's usually just 20 degrees in here, 21 degrees or so.
Mm-hmm.
So I made sure to just leave it at 21 degrees. I try not to move. I mean, you know, I was literally so
You just
careful with
looked
it.
at it for
Yes,
an hour. It's
I was
okay.
like this, just staring at the dough for like an hour. No,
Okay.
but I left it there for a while, and I'm not sure if maybe this might have affected the process in general, but I'm.
I mean, ultimately, it may have had a marginal influence on the proofing.
Mhm.
We're not, bagel heads enough that we would, taste the difference. But also, I think if you're keeping the apartment at 20 to 21 degrees, that would be pretty perfect. Really, the oven is just a quick tip to make sure that you have a controlled environment. For example, if you're doing it in the summer or if your apartment is not well insulated. So after that 1 hour rise, you're gonna go ahead and shape it. So you're gonna punch the dough to knock out the air. Then you're gonna cut it in 12 pieces in the case of this recipe, and you're gonna roll it. So this is where you need to be really skilled at handling the dough because you want to make a really nice ball, roll it into a log, and then connect both ends using your palm and blend them into one another. This is extremely tricky. And this is where the humidity level, the water content, and everything all come into effect. Because if your dough wasn't hydrated enough, it will not stick to itself. But then, if your dough was too hydrated because you were scared of it not sticking to itself, it will not hold its shape too well. So, the usual tip we give to, determine whether it's hydrated enough or not is it should feel kind of sticky like the back of a sticky note. That's the best cue, but otherwise it all has to be by feel. Now, do you think yours was too hydrated or not hydrated enough?
I think just from the texture in general, maybe it was not hydrated enough, or no, just kidding. What am I saying? It was hydrated enough because it was it was a little too sticky. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe that's too much hydration. Am I correct here?
Yeah, that would make
It's
sense. If it's
stickier,
too
it's more
sticky,
hydrated.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe it was.
Yeah.
I think I might have overhydrated it a little bit because overall it did stick. And I've had similar situations like this in the past whenever I've made something with dough that's too sticky. And but it is a whole different like recipe, whole different thing. And usually the way around it is just literally keep going, like literally keep like forming it until it stops sticking. But the more I did it, the
Yeah.
more it felt like I was just messing with gum.
Yes. So there's a couple of factors in the recipe. I don't know if you notice. I always put all of my recipes by weight and
Mm-hmm.
by volume.
Mm-hmm.
So here, essentially, baking is a science that then goes by feel. That is the best way I can put it. Because if you just follow the science, then as you gain experience, you realize that the science can be wrong. Because not in a certain, and the world is collapsing. But at first, you have to get the science down. So with bagels and baking dough in general, it's best to weigh the dough. Because when you scoop flour, if you scoop it by pressing down, you can increase the amount of flour in the cup by up to 40%. Or inversely, if you scoop it and you're not very precise, which can absolutely happen, you run the risk of having not enough flour. So either you, like the first option, which is entirely possible, it happened, you scooped up just not enough flour, so the
Mm-hmm.
ratios were off and the baker percentage was off. Or what I think is most interesting is the kneading instinct that sometimes kicks in with people. When you knead a dough and you're getting all the measurements right, it can take a hot second for the flour to hydrate as it comes into contact with water. So it can feel really dry and it can take a long time to actually come together, much longer than people think. So sometimes people will go right ahead the second they try to put it together and they say it's not coming together within the first 30 seconds, and they'll put more water, then more water until, yes, now you're able to knead it, but it'll further hydrate as you knead it, and then as you let it proof, it'll get overhydrated.
Mm-hmm.
So those are two of the things that may have happened. Ultimately, they're still great bagels, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that a big um, factor is the fact that I just don't have a scale. I
Yeah.
don't have a food scale. Can you believe this? God, what kind of person doesn't have a food scale? But yeah, that might have been an issue with my bagel making process.
Yeah, that's okay. I've actually tested the recipe without the scale as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I have an Ascali scale, which is about $30, which seems expensive, but they're really great.
Mm-hmm.
However, I may or may not, in my hoarding of kitchen tools, have put weight on it. And now, whenever I use it, it beeps really loud at me. Like, I think it wants to call the cops on me because I did it dirty. So I have to get a new Ascali scale. So now I use scales that are inaccurate, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is perhaps even worse because you're trying to do it right while choosing to go about it the wrong way.
Right.
Ultimately, as long as you're not selling them to people professionally, those are just learning experiences. So I wouldn't worry about it much. Now, see, this is just, we're just at step three. There's so many more steps. In
Oh
total,
yes.
there's seven. So the step after is the step that is inactive. You're essentially doing nothing, but it is very annoying because this makes it a 2 day recipe. You have to do an extended cold rise. You have to wrap all the shaped bagels, put them in the fridge, and let them rise overnight for at least 12 hours and up to 36. So, in the beautiful book about bagel, which I will link up in the sources, Maria Belinska wrote down that slowing down the fermentation, as I alluded to earlier, encourages the production of lactic acid bacteria, which helps build a tangy flavor, but it also helps build a beautiful bubbly crust. So here you can actually look at your bagel and tell yourself. So I would say perhaps look at the poppy seed bagel.
Mm-hmm.
It should not be completely smooth. Based on the way the recipe was designed, there should be tiny little bubbles at the surface,
Mm-hmm.
and that would be a sign that the cold fermentation was correct. So this is a little nod, but that little detail really amps up the texture and the flavor. Then there's the fifth step, which is another reason why bagels are not that beloved or made at home. I really like them. I'm just explaining the truth. You have to boil them. So the next day, once they're out in the oven, you're gonna prepare water with a little bit of honey or molasses or barley malt syrup. Now, honey and barley malt syrup are the two most historically, I want to say, not relevant but accurate food items that you can use. However, barley malt syrup is really hard to find. You have to go to a health food store or actually call them and check if they have it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you might find it collecting dust in a corner. So I recommend using molasses if you want to imitate barley malt, or you can use honey. But if, for example, you are vegan, then just do your best. So you're gonna boil it in honey water or barley malt water, and that's gonna gelatinize the starch on top and create a beautifully glossy crust. Now, this is another step where the timing is unbelievably important. If you boil it for too long, the dough will collapse on you. But then again, if you boil it for too short a time, the dough will not expand, which is going to leave you with a finished product that's really dense and hard. So I think in the recipe, I may have put it as like 30 seconds. I actually always keep a timer because I have too much anxiety to mess with this. Then the fun step, which is the one where you really have to be devoted, is dipping. The second it's out of the mixture, you have to take it. You can take it with tongs, and then I like to drop it on a cooling rack and immediately take it again with my hands and drop it in the topping of your choice. So if you're doing an all dressed bagel, poppy seed, garlic, onion, sesame, or anything of the sort where there's an outside topping, this is the time to do it. So you have to do it immediately while it's still hot and sticky, kind of like how you should salt fried foods the second they're out of the oven. If you don't do it, they just won't stick. If you wait too long, it's just going to cool and set.
Hmm.
So my technique is to just burn my hands. This is it's just
I,
the
I
best way
used
to
I
do
used
it.
tongs.
Yeah, I have some, but they leave dents,
I know
and
that
I'm a
that's
dedicated artist.
yes, that's exactly why I told you I was gonna cut them because the bagels looked a little ugly, and I just wanted to kind of use small little sections.
Oh, that's why you wanted to cut them?
Yes, that's exactly why. That's why I wanted to cut it into smaller, bite-sized pieces, so I don't have to look at it
Yeah,
while
because
I'm here.
your definition of bite size is certainly more than average. So
Oh
when you
yeah,
said you actually wanted to make them bite sized, I was like, something's wrong.
yeah, yeah, yes.
That's okay. We can actually give it a try together, and one day we can make a batch. Actually, we're not gonna do that, but we could, and then we can pass it off to each other whenever we're like annoyed with the kneading. And the next day, I'll take them with my hands. I don't feel anything anymore.
But yeah, but you're right. It did cause the dents, but it wasn't like that difficult. I want to say, like, you know what? It was literally such a tedious process. I'm having like war flashbacks of like this. It kind of felt like when I was literally dipping it with the tongs and taking out. I'm like, oh my god, I could just picture everything because I did burn myself, but not because I was like using
No,
my
because you're
hands, but it's
touching
because
boiling honey water.
exactly no, but not just that. I accidentally kind of dropped it on my first attempt, and you know how that goes. So
Yes,
that's
the
always fun.
splashing is intense.
It's always
Yeah,
fun.
it's really a tricky recipe for that. I think it's really a lot more labor than is expected, and it's also sometimes you have tedious recipes which you can pass off and have your children help out with.
Hmm.
This is something where the dough is too hard and the ingredients are too like the tools are too dangerous for you to pass it on to your children. So you really have to make it yourself from start to end. And then, this is once you've thoroughly burned your hands and if
Hmm.
you've done hopefully most of the things somewhat okay, you're then going to proceed to the final step, which is baking. You're going to bake them at 450 for 20 to 25 minutes, and then you're going to flip them halfway. To me, after 2 days, that is the most nerve wracking step because you could still underbake it, and there's no way for you to know. Theoretically, you could use a thermometer, but because of the diameter of the ring, in, that makes up the donut, you might hit it wrong and still have the heat from the outside of the oven closer to the crust and get the wrong temp. So there's really no way to know if you've done it right other than you've
Hmm.
made this enough times that you know when I say 450 on a recipe, it translates to your oven. So this is essentially the very short and very simple way of
Hmm.
making a Montreal style bagel. So to me, once all that's over, I don't bother slicing. Some people think slicing is a sin. I take it right out of the oven. I burn my hands one more time and I just eat it right away. That's the way to go, honestly.
And I would agree. And as I did mention this to you before, I did not do that strictly
That's okay.
because I was so tired. It wasn't that like it smelled really good actually, but I had like
Yeah.
I mentioned before too. I literally just ate breakfast right before this because I knew that if I go by a principle and it's the same as when I go shopping for groceries. I can't go to the like to the grocery store hungry because then I'm going to
Hmm.
buy everything. And me and Lisa are also back on the gym grind, and we're trying to watch our calorie intake. And in my head, I'm like, I should just eat my regular breakfast that I have in my
Hmm.
mornings and leave the bagel for later. It's just I thought about it long and hard. I was like, you know what? I want to be surprised at the very end for this, especially because I was also afraid to try this straight out of
You
there
were
because I was like,
scared.
it smells good, but can I trust myself? And I was like, you know what? Let me save it for the podcast. I really wanted to save that reaction for this, anyways.
Yeah,
And I think
absolutely.
whenever I have the chance to go try the actual bagel in Montreal, it's like fresh out the oven. I think I'd rather have that as my first time than just
Oh
my
yeah,
mock version
absolutely.
of
No,
bagels.
well, once we're both in Montreal, we'll definitely go, no problem.
Right.
And like I also go in Montreal all the time, so we will get there and we'll prosper. Now, essentially, what I listed here are the steps to making what I really think is the hardest baked good, and it speaks to just how talented, devoted, patient, and strong the people at those local bagel shops are. Because to make this every day, and also both of those shops are open 24 hours. They're just making bagels throughout the day nonstop every like 7 days a week. So to me, the difficulty of the baked good itself only speaks to how important it is to support those local businesses. Because unless you're actually, living in Nova Scotia and trying to recreate it that one time, you're much, much better off walking to your local bagel shop and asking very politely if you could get the freshest bagel available. Most likely, once again, if you're very nice, they will do it. So now, amongst the bagels you made the all dressed, which a lot of people also call the everything bagel.
Yes.
And the version you have is inspired by a shop I know in Toronto,
Mm-hmm.
but it is not exactly identical to some
Mm-hmm.
of what you can get in Montreal. Do you
Yes.
know what the difference is?
Is it the sea salt?
No.
It's the rosemary.
Okay, so there is a third version that is rosemary. I'm talking in the everything bagel mix.
Oh,
There's a different ingredient.
the caraway seeds.
Yeah, caraway seeds. So I've had that at New Bugle in Kensington Market. That shop is incredible. Their stuff is really, really good, and they
Mm-hmm.
do Montreal style beautifully. And
Mm-hmm.
they use caraway seeds, and it gives it a really, I mean, you're about to know what it gives it, but I think it's a really interesting added layer. So now, are you ready to try the all dressed bagel?
Yes, I am. And I forgot to put the sea salt on this one because I'm dumb. So
It's
I
okay.
just have it here with me so I could just
Yeah,
put it at the top.
that's perfect. Don't worry about it.
Just to get the the full effect or something. All right, I'm ready.
Okay, Sati. So, what do you think? What's the flavor story right now?
So many. It's like I'm getting a flavor there that I don't really know. It might be the
Hmm.
caraway seeds, maybe. I don't know that flavor at all. Or maybe it's just the mix of
Yes.
everything all combined. But it's strange that I can taste the sesame. The poppy, not as much.
Mhm.
Maybe I added too much garlic or onion, which maybe.
So, I can
Uh,
actually explain it.
mhm,
It is the caraway. So, yes, there's garlicky, nutty, umami esque flavor reminiscent of garlic and everything
mhm,
that's happening. And there's a little bit of crunch from the sea salt. But what the caraway adds is a cooling, minty flavor. And to me, that is phenomenal, and it takes the entirety of the bagel experience to a new level. But it is something that you might not be accustomed to if you're used to, getting just regular everything bagels from the grocery store.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I just can't. I couldn't wrap my head around it because, in a sense, it kind of. I would say that it has I don't want to say that it does because it doesn't. It doesn't taste like that. It's just it reminds me of a licorice type flavor, but it's not licorice.
Hmm.
But it
No,
reminds
but
me of that
actually, it
flavor.
does have
Mhm.
licorice tones, yes.
But
So,
again,
yeah, it's a
it's
caraway.
not the same thing. But I mean, it is. But it's you know what I mean. You know exactly what I
It's different yet reminiscent
mean.
of licorice.
Yes.
Yeah. So for me, it was such an interesting addition that I had to put it in and be like, this is the all dressed, fully dressed. Because usually it would really just be poppy seeds, sesame, garlic, onion, and sometimes sea salt.
I
But
forgot
yeah,
the sea salt like an idiot, but I added it now.
that's that's
Again,
fine.
good bagel, really good bagel. I really enjoyed that one.
Mhm.
I just think I might have added a little too much garlic. Even you literally gave me specific instructions, but maybe I just added too much of
Oh no,
something
it's
somehow.
by
You know.
heart. You just go by heart. For me, the reason why I added the quantities of
Hmm.
toppings was
Hmm.
to make sure that you had enough for all three bagels. Because
Oh
essentially,
yeah.
it gives you a batch of a dozen, but you get three of each, or
Hmm.
yeah, three of each.
No,
So
yeah.
it was just to make sure that you had enough. Because the first couple times I did it, I would be basically taking them out as they were boiling, chucking them in the bowl, and then I would realize on the first one that I was out. And I would have to start essentially refill the bowl as everything was boiling around me. So it was very stressful. But
No,
yeah, I
yeah.
just go by feel.
I usually always go by feel. It's just it's my first time making this one, and I was like, you know what, let me just go by it.
Hmm.
And it's strange because I have measuring spoons or cups. I don't
Hmm.
know how you call it. The little things
Yeah,
that'll tell
spoons.
you like, oh, there's a tablespoon. I have that, but I just use a legit regular tablespoon, like a
Oh
spoon.
yeah.
And maybe in that sense, maybe 1 tablespoon to you is just like this, but for me it's kind of a little bit of a mountain. Maybe that's where I messed up a little bit. Not a bad bagel though. Again, really good.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So it is entirely possible that the proportions are a little bit different, and that's not a
Mhm.
problem. Now, when you make a bagel at home and you do the Montreal style, there is a segment of the trifecta which you omit, which
Mhm.
is the wood-fired oven. And it has generated in the past years, and for several years actually, since at least 1997, it has generated a lot of controversy, which take us to our last segment, which this time will not have food featured in it, but I did feel like it was really important to bring it up in the episode. And it's why we'll be not talking about wood fired ovens. So, there's been a lot of buzz in the news in the past years about the wood fired ovens that are traditionally used to make Montreal style ovens. And they've gotten a really bad rap.
Mhm.
They do, like, we have to acknowledge that they are controversial in and out of itself, because although they are historically significant and they bring a great flavor, and just the smell when you turn the corner of that little hickory wood or a little log of
Yes.
wood coming
Yes.
up your nose is so exciting. This morning I went to Bagel Time at like 6 7 a.m. and I was like, is the shop near? And I had my mask on and I got a slight whiff of that little smog. And I got so excited. I started running. So that gives you an idea.
Yes.
But, you know, they're still not perfect. They do emit fine particles that can provoke asthma, and they do contain harmful chemicals like benzene. Fair is fair. They
Mhm.
also emit smog, which is certainly no good, as we're trying to protect the air quality of big cities like Montreal, Toronto, New York, and the like. So I thought for a long time that perhaps they should be banned at the expense of their historical significance, but then, as I was waiting for my poppy seed bagel at 7 a.m., I saw an article by Eater. So it's an article from 2017. Information may have changed since then, and haven't done a full coverage of the whole breadth of wood fire oven controversy. But this article was particularly interesting to me. When media outlets all over Canada started talking about residents who complained about wood fire ovens in 2017, Eater pointed out that every single article contained commentary from two Mile End residents, François Grenier and Sarah Gilbert. There was a third resident, but ultimately those were the ones that made the most noise, and that third resident was only in one article by the Montreal Gazette. Beyond them, as far as Eater could see at the time, there was no petition, no Facebook group, no movement against the ovens. It seemed to be a really isolated movement led by a few really, really loud individuals. Now, I think it's a harsh critique and they're allowed to have their own opinions and I won't attack them, but to me, it felt a little bit like Karen against the world.
For sure.
And
Yeah.
in this context, it would actually be carrying against local businesses that have been,
Hmm.
trying to prosper through the years, while offering high quality products and maintaining their traditions and history.
Right.
So I kind of like to take their concerns with a grain of salt. So on the, on the other end, opposite of those people who are just louder than the average person would ever be, and making it sound like there were great numbers of people that were completely appalled by those ovens. There was a lot of people and a lot of chefs and local business owners that were unrelated to Fairmount and Seviatar who were defending their historical significance and everything it brought to the bagel itself. So amongst all of that, do I think wood fire ovens are perfect? No. And I will not go talk to the mayor of Valérie Plante to defend them. I have better things to do with my time.
All of us.
But I do invite all of us collectively to stop even worrying about it. And I invite us to do so for two very specific reasons. First of all, both Saint-Viateur Bagel and Fairmount Bagel have made massive efforts to reduce their emissions, and they've been really costly, but they've tried. Saint-Viateur Bagel switched to eco logs in order to filter to cut back on the problem. Then Fairmount Bagel spent an insane amount of money. I'll fact check it and I'll post a number, but I believe as of 2017 it was $250,000 for a business that sells bagels for $1.10. They spent $250,000 trying different filtration systems, and now they have one that meets Montreal standards for emissions. So they have one that meets the standards to make sure that even though they are producing some amount of emissions, it's not too much, it's not a dangerous amount. So that machine, fair is fair. It's been reported that it still breaks down often, but they are trying their best to be good neighbors while preserving a technique that is really, really meaningful. So
Sure.
I think in terms of harm reduction, this is incredibly important. And I'm not sure that we should completely cancel a device if we can make it safer. And this
Yeah.
is what they've been trying day and night to do at the expense of the viability of their own business. Now, there's another factor that's quite important. In 2017, when critics were writing about the emissions of the 70 local restaurants on the island who do emit fine particulate pollution, and those are businesses that are not kept exclusively to bagels. For example, I believe Portuguese chicken and places who make chicken like La Poule Mouillée, they use wood fire ovens as well to get that char and that flavor. Well, when they did a review, the Montreal Gazette wrote that those restaurants were the fourth most significant fine particulate polluters after, in first place, transportation, second place, wood burning in private homes, and in third place, industrial sources. They were behind all of those in the amount of emissions.
Crazy.
I'm not saying they were perfect. I'm
Hmm.
saying they were a lot they were harming a lot less than those bigger industries. In my head, we're beating up our local businesses and messing them up with massive fines. I'm talking $50,000 fines and endless restrictions instead of building laws that would hold the bigger industries accountable. To me, that's a little bit why it feels like a Karen versus local businesses.
Yeah.
Is because small minded, it's a small minded, hurtful fight. Because, yes, the issue is legitimate. Wood fire ovens are not perfect. They're wood fire ovens.
Right.
But the legitimacy of the issue is severely undermined by the impact in comparison to larger industries. So it's, in my mind, the reason why we're hearing so much noise, and there are so many articles about this, is because it's easier to stand up and complain about two local bagel businesses than it is to crack down on the massive transportation industry. If you can see the cause of some of your grief directly standing in front of you in the neighborhood where you live, it's much easier to go up and complain and take a picture in front of the shop than it is to complain about every single truck coming across the island every day. You know?
Agreed. Yep.
So ultimately, the fight is still ongoing, and one of the owners is open to getting rid of the oven only if their competitor agrees to get rid of theirs as well. Now, it's a story that's still ongoing, but personally, I'm always on the side of harm reduction in the name of small business protection. Now, I know this was hot and heavy, and I might not have done the best reporting on this because this podcast is pre canceled nonsense by someone who just really likes bagels. So I'm hoping I did it justice, and I would rather do it a little bit wrong than not cover it at all. This is a story that is still ongoing, developing, and regardless, this is where I stand.
I thought
So
it was
I
very
know this
informative.
is, yeah, it's a cool topic, but I think it's a topic that we need to let go of to focus on bigger things that might make Montreal better.
For sure.
Now, I know this was super heavy, so I do have wholesome brain tickling questions to mess with you with. So, out of everything we've tried today, which bagel was your favorite?
The all dressed, the everything bagel.
Mm.
I, I, it's very close to the sesame. The sesame was, I don't know why, but the sesame
It
was
has that little
really good.
something.
Yes,
Yeah.
sesame was really good. It doesn't mean that poppy wasn't good. It's just my least favorite.
I mean, it's one you get when you get a bag of 12 and you're just like, surprise me, but you're not
Yeah,
surprised.
yeah, and
So,
I'll eat it, sure, but I won't pick it.
yeah,
But
I'll put avocado on it. I'll make something happen. For me, actually, I'm perplexed because okay, so the bagels I got them from Bagel Time. Seriously, anyone in Toronto, if you want a really good Montreal style bagel, I love Bagel Time. They were incredibly nice to me, and I also love New Bugle. Both of them are great. I know there's also a place called Bagel on Fire. I haven't gone yet because for the past 3 years, I've been going to New Bugle every second Sunday. So this tells you where I'm at. It's not that I don't want to check out the competition, it's that it's just I have it so good. But Bagel Time doesn't put caraway on their everything bagel.
mhm.
So if there was caraway on it, and it was my recipe, because I'm a self involved person, all dressed my way would win. However, I've had the most wonderfully surprising, delightful experience with the sesame one. So I think for the first time in my life, and this is not something I will ever repeat out loud again, sesame was the best one, even above all dressed.
Okay,
And
yeah.
I hope you got that on tape because I'm not repeating myself.
Oh
Now,
my God.
if you take your favorite
Hmm.
and you just do whatever you want regardless of brunch, just in your own house with what you have in your fridge right now, how would you serve the everything bagel, all dressed bagel?
How would I serve it with everything that I have in my
Yep.
fridge right now?
Yep.
Define serve. How would you serve it? I want to get your POV on this first.
Okay, hold on. So, do I take your bagel or mine? Because I have a good idea for mine. I haven't thought of yours yet.
Do your sesame one because I
Okay.
want to. I'm trying to build up
So,
mine.
so my fridge is a beautiful wild place, which is why there's no space in it ever.
Hmm.
I would use the cream cheese I did get from Bagel Time. It's a whipped
Hmm.
cream cheese, I believe. It
Even
is
better.
so tangy and it is such a high quality product.
Hmm.
And I think that would go beautifully. And also, might I say the obvious here? I think bagels in Canada fit the history of the sweet and sour, especially when you add cream cheese. I think there's a pattern. I think there's a pattern. But here, I would do sesame bagel with that toasted nuttiness. And then I don't even have to add nuts. It's perfect because I always have
Right.
nuts on everything.
Right.
I would do a nice smattering of cream cheese with a little sort of divot in the middle. So if you were to
Hmm.
go around the bagel,
Hmm.
I would do a divot in the middle of that circle. And then, because I have it in my fridge, I would put Saskatoon berry jam.
Hmm.
Or I would use frozen blueberries that I have thawed out, which would be tricky to configure. But then again, it takes 2 days to make bagel. I'm sure I could figure that one out.
Hmm.
And I would put them in the little divot. It would get really nice and jammy because they're completely melted or thawed out. And I would finish it off with honey. Those are the two options. But obviously, if I'm using Saskatoon berry jam, I would not put honey because that's too much. That would be my at home way of serving it if I was having it at home brunch.
Which sounds fantastic.
It
I
would be a
think
treat.
if it was mine, so since mine is the everything seasoning, So let's assume that it does have the caraway seeds, right?
Hmm.
Because of the caraway seeds and the distinct flavor that it adds. Let's see, what do I have in my fridge actually? I can't even think at the top of my head what I have in my
Do you
fridge.
have proteins?
I do. Well, yes, I do. I have raw proteins.
Okay.
As in, like, I have chicken and beef in there, but
Yeah.
it's a little hard to think because in my mind, what I'm actually picturing. So the bagel would actually be it would be the bagel itself with the caraway seeds. However, the spread would be the cream cheese spread infused with some dill, onion, capers, and some garlic. You mix it all together, spread it. There you go. That's it. That's my breakfast.
I like that. I would actually, most likely, personally, I would add pickled red onions and
Yes.
cucumber on top with a crack of salt and pepper. That
Yes,
would
actually.
be,
Yes.
that would make it hefty, but also a little bit lighter somehow. That's actually what I had in my order today. I had an everything bagel
Hmm.
with cream cheese, red onion, and cucumbers. So I'm seeing what you're seeing. I think here what I like is that it's basically a lox bagel
Hmm.
without the lox.
Without,
So I
yes.
would call it the sea legs.
That's a good name. You're good
That
at
would be a
making
really
names.
cool
Yeah,
name.
that's really good. I like that one. That's
I really
really
like
good.
coming up with names. We're gonna have a cool menu at the right way. Now, I
Literally.
have a question that will definitely break your brain.
Hmm.
If you had your own bagel shop and you could make any bagel with any topping within, such as some raisin, or any topping outside,
Hmm.
what would your flavor be?
Monterey Jack and jalapeno. S-
Nice.
yes. Yes,
I like that.
specifically that. And maybe I would obviously adjust it a little bit. If anything, I would add a few extra spices or something. I just can't
Hmm.
think of it at the top of my head. But the first thing that came to my mind was I want a bagel with jalapenos, actual jalapenos on top. They cannot be pickled.
Hmm.
It cannot be pickled jalapenos. It has to be the
It will not be pickled. Okay.
raw green jalapenos with the Monterey
Hmm.
Jack cheese as well, and it has to be Monterey Jack cheese because it has a very distinct flavor in comparison to every other
Hmm.
cheese. Obviously, it can't be cheddar. It cannot be cheddar. It has to be Monterey Jack.
Okay. So at the right way, it will be Monterey Jack. And then I think this one, the name is easy, would be the Green Jack. That would be a really
The
cool
green
name.
Jack. Yes. Oh my God, that's really good.
That
Shit.
would be really
Yeah,
nice.
you come up with
Yeah.
names like nothing. This is super quick.
Oh, it makes me so happy. It's so fun because you just like basically break down essential elements by color or characteristic, and then just
Hmm.
have fun with it. Mine, it would be really nice. Also, of course, I have a name for it. It makes me very happy. So there's this spice blend that I sent you that I also have at home. Actually, I visited my parents one time, and when I come up to their cottage, I like to empty my grocery bag, and sometimes there's stuff I brought on the way over from Toronto to Quebec,
Hmm.
and there's stuff I bought at random grocery stores on the way there. So one time I went to Quebec, I left a bunch of Japanese ingredients in my pantry of my parents in the middle of the mountains. And I
Hmm.
came back at Christmas and I was like, Mom, why do you have togarashi? And she was like, Who? And I was like, No, why do you have that ingredient? And she was like, I don't know. This feels like something you gave me. Because I do give her ingredients I know she would know how to use.
Hmm.
But this was not one of them, and I've actually been looking for this all the way in Toronto. So the blend is this. I think you recognize the bottle.
Yes.
It's tiny but mighty. So usually it would have cayenne in it. It would have tangerine peel, black sesame. It would have white sesame as well, and then I believe it has uh, gochugaru, so the Korean pepper, or sometimes you can use another Japanese pepper. In this one, it has green laver and ginger. So this would be a really neat bagel, and what I would call it would actually be the overdressed.
Smart. Very good.
Because it has all those things that are reminiscent of the all dressed, but it's a completely different take on it. And then
Right.
maybe if I'm able to sneak it in the production line, although that would, mean you have to know exactly how many you're making 2 days ahead, I would put smoked paprika in the dough to make it red.
Smart.
That would be kind of cool.
Smart. Yeah.
Yeah, that would make me happy.
It's funny you
So
mentioned that
those
actually
would be.
because go ahead. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
No, I was gonna say it's
That's
funny you
okay.
mentioned that because I once saw this thing where it was like you don't use paprika for flavor, you just use it coloring. Um, and it's good that you brought that up because you're 100% right. Yeah, it
Oh
should be
yeah.
just to make it red.
I mean, smoked paprika does have a distinct flavor, and I use
Hmm.
it for the flavor. Very
Hmm.
often, I'll do a mix of smoked paprika, garlic, and oregano as a
Hmm.
base for just anything when I don't know what to do.
Hmm.
However, in a bagel, you will definitely lose it
Right.
before you get the color out, like a
Right.
100%.
Right.
So here would be for aesthetic purposes, because I'm a sucker for the aesthetic.
I agree.
Now we have come to the end of the mile end. How do you feel about this episode?
It was great. Fantastic. Think I I think I have the same reaction and the same answer for every single episode we've done. I loved it. I loved trying out the bagels. I actually really I've said this also in the previous ones. I look forward to trying the real deal, the real stuff. Like when we had the pizza episode and we tried the Donair sauce. I look forward to trying the real Montreal-style bagels. Uh, but I enjoyed it. It was very informative. There's a bunch of stuff again that it just catches me off guard. I learned
Hmm.
something new. Every single week I learn something new.
Yeah, I'm hoping one day we do an episode that's really long, really boring, and full of really obvious information. That's my goal. I haven't cracked that nut yet, but it's coming. I'm sure I'll get there.
Okay.
I'm thinking an episode on milk added to it.
Oh
So
my
now,
god.
for me, this episode was a big one. But once again, I think that for every episode because I'm just
Right.
really excited about those topics.
Right.
But it was also the one I definitely know the most about. Like, bagels have a really rich history worldwide as the food that made it, despite all odds. And I do mean all odds. And I'm really happy it blossomed into its own thing in Montreal. I'm really glad we have it.
And thank you for listening to the Canadian Food Podcast. We sure hoped you liked this episode.
Now, if you liked it, please leave a 5-star review somewhere. You can probably create like a geo tag on Google Maps of the Business to Canadian Food podcast and leave a review there. That would be pretty neat. And please let us know on Google reviews what you liked and what you truly hated.
Every
Now, do you? No, I'm sticking with this. Do you think poppy seed bagel is a legitimate flavor? Can you please explain what you're tasting? I have a lot of questions, and you may have all the answers. So please tell me more via email at thecanadianfoodpodcast@hotmail.com. You can also check out our website, thecanadianfoodblog.ca. Now, if your name is Kenji Alt-López and you'd like to debate bagel cookery with us, please hit me up on Facebook so we can set something up. This is essentially me doing a shout out to the god of food science himself. But hey, it's worth it. I'm happy to fail. Now, if you're a human who would like to hear this podcast all over again in French, Le Podcast La Bouffe Canadienne is available now wherever you got this podcast from. Go listen to it. Juan's masculine presence might be missed, but don't worry. I've been told I sound like a man over the phone in French. So we should be covered there. What?
No, my bad. That was good. Come back next week for another episode. And the week after for just one more.
Okay, that's it. Bye bye.